When I was a 15-year-old girl and my best friend, who I will call Ari, was 14, we had a scary encounter. We were huge stoners back then. We were young, but our whole friend group was skaters, so we ended up smoking a lot. It had been raining all day and it was going to be a rainy night as well. And as our friends were all skaters, it wasn't shocking that nobody wanted to hang out that night. Wet ground means no skating normally. Well, Ari and I still wanted to hang out, so we went out that night to smoke together. I can't recall if we left our homes and met up, or if we were already together in one of our homes and went out together. Either way, we went out and figured which of the many spots for smoking would be the driest. We settled on this one at the handball courts of my elementary school. I'm going to try to describe this spot as best I can. So it was a yard to my elementary school with handball courts, and we sat on a bench under a massive tree. In front of us was a large concrete slope going down for the teachers to drive up and park. We would have to stand up and then walk down the slope in order to exit. At the bottom of the slope was a bunch of basketball courts, like 10 of them, and behind that was a large playground. It was public park property stuff, but somewhat connected to the school. This night was very quiet and we hadn't seen anybody outside because of the wet weather. It was our summer break, so adults were likely asleep preparing for work the next day. We were sitting on this bench, smoking and playing music. I noticed from far away at the end of the basketball courts and just before the playground, a huge man was sitting there on a bench. I could tell from his silhouette that it was a big dude. I told Ari, and her, being the more reckless of the two, told me to relax and that we were fine. But me being the really on guard type of person, I could not chill out. I kept telling her that something wasn't right and I made her turn off the music. What was this clearly grown man doing in the wet, rainy park at midnight, totally alone? He himself wasn't smoking. He wasn't on his phone. And he was stiffly facing us directly. He didn't turn his head once our entire session. I mentioned this all to Ari towards the end of our session, and she finally agreed that something was really off. We were ready to leave though, so we didn't think it was a big deal and would just go. We kept an eye on the person down the bench as we left. Now, if you recall and understood my description, we had to walk down that slope to exit the area. This also meant getting closer to that guy. We would still be far from him, but closer than we were now. And he would obviously see the direction we were going for a minute, as it was a big slope. We started heading down the concrete slope, and the whole time Ari and I were holding each other's hands tightly. My eyes didn't leave the guy for even a hair of a second. I was so focused but also freaked the heck out. I kept telling Ari not to run away and to walk calmly, and I was probably trying to convince myself at the same time. To be honest, I just felt like if we started running, he would know we were scared. I can't explain why, but I felt like that would make things worse. We were not even halfway down the slope when the dude very slowly and stiffly rose up from the bench. My eyes were locked onto him and he was huge. Then in one swift movement, he went from totally frozen to darting directly towards us. I mean, this guy was seriously running and his legs were so long his strides were massive. The second he took off directly for us, Ari and I dropped our grip from each other and bolted down the slope into the middle of the road. We were running and screaming and all I could imagine was him grabbing one of us. Like I said, it was totally a wasteland outside that night, so even what was usually a busier St. during the day was so dead so late at night in bad weather. I'm not sure why, but I guess we telepathically agreed to run towards where our group usually hung out when we weren't smoking, the park that was across the street and down the block. It was a block that we went around the basketball courts, so the entire run we could see the guy darting towards us and making his way onto the road behind us. We thought by some small chance we'd see our friends hanging out at the other park, but we were wrong and it was deserted. I could feel both of us becoming exhausted when we realized we probably wouldn't see anyone for over a mile, and that if we did, it would be by absolute luck on a night like tonight. We ran and ran until we reached an overpass of a highway that was still empty, but at least it had more streetlights. We hadn't looked back for a while now, but when we reached the overpass, we noticed that the huge guy was gone. I'm not sure what made him quit. Maybe he realized we were not to be messed with, or that he underestimated how fast we were or how far we could run without getting tired. Maybe he just wanted to scare us. I'll never know, and I don't really care to know either. I live in northern British Columbia, Canada. A couple of years ago, my friend had invited me to come with him, his mom, and his sister to a resort by a lake an hour and a half or so out of town. This was the end of June and beginning of July. The place is called a resort, but it's more like a cabin in the woods type of place. There's a main log building where you check in and it has a restaurant, a few log cabins and some spots down by the lake for RVs to park in. There's a highway that you turn off up to the lot where the check-in building is, and to the right of the highway is forest for miles as well as everywhere else around that area. Around the lake there's some houses and whatnot, but if it isn't a long weekend there's not too many people out there. The cabins and RV area is separate. And the main building is about a 5 to 8 minute walk away from the cabins up a spiral RD. A little bit past the main building, there's a clearing where you can sit in a couple of tables. And about 50 feet into the woods past those tables are 2 small lagoons surrounded by an old wire fence. When we got in for the evening, we unloaded the car, got acquainted with the log cabin, which was nice, and then we went out to explore around. Not too much interesting stuff happened the first day, as we didn't explore a whole lot before dark. Skip to the next day and it was cloudy and raining, which we were hoping for, as that meant that there were very few people at the resort and we'd get free reign over it. We explored down by the lake and around the cabin areas more thoroughly, and eventually we made our way up to the clearing where the tables are located. We looked at the tables to see that they hadn't been touched in what looked like a very long time from the amount of grass and weeds that was built up around them. While investigating, I took notice that around 50 feet or so back into the woods there was what looked to be a clear area. We slid down into this ditch-like area, which was probably around an 8-foot difference in elevation from the table area, and trampled through the brush. We eventually came to this spot, which we were pretty sure were lagoons due to the way they were constructed, and we noticed that there was a wire fence around it. We tooled around the area looking at the lagoons, and eventually we left, planning to come back later in the day as it was getting time to eat dinner. The next day we went back to that area with the tables, planning to go into the lagoon area once again. But before we had a chance to go down the ditch, we stopped because of the noise. The noise we heard were 2 small twigs being walked over and snapped in the lagoon and ditch area we had traveled the previous day. We stuck around for about 10 minutes or so until we got hit with an intense feeling of dread at being attacked by a bear or some other animal that could be walking around in the lagoon area. We went back to our cabin where we played poker for the rest of the night. While playing, we discussed the events that had taken place and eventually laughed it off, saying it was probably just a bear passing through or rabbits in the area. The next day it was raining heavily and much darker than the past couple of days. We left our cabin and planned to go to the lagoon area later, but we wanted to chill around a medium forested area close to the cabins first. We were messing around in the woods, breaking big sticks on trees. Suddenly we had heard what sounded to be someone else doing the same thing about 200 feet away in the direction we were facing. It was hard to judge how far exactly it was because the way the forest carries sound. But it was far in front of us. At first we thought it was an echo, but after experimenting a little more, we found out that it wasn't an echo. Someone or something out there was also banging sticks, copying us. We wouldn't have cared too much about this until we took notice of where it was. The entire area around there and beyond was all forested and not near any of the cabins. Having someone in those forests along with us that far in and in the less favorable weather, with being very few people at the resort at that time, was unlikely. We decided to leave the area and come back later during the evening. So after leaving the area, we went back around to the lagoon area and listened for a couple minutes. We couldn't hear any walking, so we assumed that we were right about it being a passing forest creature yesterday. Not even 5 minutes into us being around the lagoon area, I told my friend to stop moving. We both stopped and listened. We heard what sounded to be the footsteps again, but as they were coming in louder and faster, we got that same overbearing feeling of dread. We hightailed it out of there spooked and we booked it back to our cabin. Later that evening we returned to the forest clearing area where we had heard the branch against the tree noise earlier in the day. We again started smacking branches against trees, this time not hearing anything. But as I turned to my left, something caught my eye. There was what appeared to be a person standing behind a tree, and I saw them duck behind it when they noticed that I noticed them. I nearly screamed, but I held it in and immediately told my friend that we needed to get out of there, and we sprinted back to the cabin. Later that night, while sitting in the locked area where our beds were, we discussed what had happened the last 2 days. The area that I had seen the person was in the exact same area where we had heard the mimic banging earlier that day. Also, both days we had been down near the lagoon area and had heard footsteps walking around. It was very creepy as there was too much of a coincidence for the person or figure I had seen to not have been watching us and following where we were going both days. Very strange activity as it was a rainy day and night both days that we were out exploring. We left the next day as our booking had ended, and I was happy that I didn't have to stay there any longer, being constantly watched. One night I was leaving my girlfriend's house at around 3 a.m. because even though I could stay late at night watching movies on the couch, her parents didn't allow me to stay overnight. Anyways, it was a stormy, rainy night that included a heavy downpour and a lot of wind, making it difficult to drive home. My girlfriend lives around 25 miles away from my house, and I normally drive out to the main big highway to get home. However, on this stormy night I wanted to drive for as little as possible, so I took a smaller back RD highway to get home this time. I used the shortcut, which I regretted using on that day because that way was barely lit and surrounded by open plains from both sides, so the wind was really whipping. As I was driving as fast as was allowed in the heavy rain, the few lights that were on the road were completely off. Power went out, I guess, so naturally I had to slow down. Using the headlights as bright as possible, I still couldn't see where I was, mainly due to all the water all over the windshield in front of me, and I was having trouble seeing the road. To make matters worse, it suddenly started hailing. I began to panic because I could barely tell where I was going. My windshield was fogged up and I had taken my dad's car, so I was worried about the hail doing damage to it. I decided to pull over on the side of the road for a while, and not soon after I saw what looked like somebody waving a flashlight. I stuck my head out the window to see better, facing all the hail and heavy rain, and I saw a man approaching me. He seemed normal to me from afar, but as he got closer I noticed how unusually tall he was, which creeped me out. I couldn't see the details of his face from afar in the storm, so I closed the window and locked all my doors and tried to look from inside the car. The guy then started to wave the flashlight rapidly until he got so close that I could see his face. The man had a smile on his face, which was the definition of smiling ear to ear. It was so creepy and he was mumbling stuff that I couldn't hear. I was literally about to soil my pants until I noticed another car approaching behind me. When I looked back to see the car behind me, the man either backed away or turned off his flashlight or something. Because I looked back out my side window for him and he was nowhere to be seen. Granted, I didn't have much visibility, but I didn't see the flashlight they had been waving around. I followed the car that was behind me as it helped guide me on the road until I finally got back to the main road. The rain had stopped for the most part, but I still had to drive slow due to the ice on the road. The drive was taking at least 3 times longer than it normally did and I lost connection for a while. But as soon as I looked back to the road, I saw a black dog in front of my car. Despite how slow I was going, I couldn't dodge the dog. I got out of my car and looked behind me, but I found nothing at all. No indication that I had run over a dog or another animal. I ran back to my car forgetting about the conditions and I started to speed back home. A strange urge inside of me was telling me to look over at the plain surrounding the road. I would glance out on the plain from time to time and I saw nothing. About 10 minutes later, close to my home now, I looked out my side window and I saw a tall figure wearing white, waving a flashlight rapidly out in the plains. I finally made it home safe and sound after what felt like a whole day's worth of driving. I have no idea what to think of the tall man with the waving flashlight, or what to think about the phantom dog I hit. A lot of strange things happened that night, and I even questioned myself sometimes if I was hallucinating and if anything was real. It was by far the scariest night of my life. This was in the early 2000s, and the exact reason I was driving that night escapes me now, but one autumn night at around 8 p.m. when it was already dark. I took a right turn off the main highway. It was a small neighborhood nestled between 2 cities of about 100,000 people each. The rain was coming down hard and my wipers were on medium. I wasn't in a hurry, just driving when I came around a bend in the road to a neighborhood with maybe 40 houses, a small cul-de-sac development. I remember approaching the bend and seeing a woman. She was about 20 feet ahead, standing at the end of a driveway lit up by my headlights. She was wearing a tank top and jeans, her arms crossed tight around herself like she was trying to warm up. She was staring directly at me. Not the car, but at me. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but my first thought was that she needed help. I was young, just trying to be a good guy, so I slowed down and rolled down my passenger side window. My car didn't have power windows, so I had to lean over and crank it down. She could see that I had to roll it down, and as I opened it just a few inches, she did something strange. She reached out with her hand and grabbed the top of the window. Her fingers coming so close to my face that it startled me. At first I didn't know what to think. I had asked if she was okay, but she didn't answer. I could see her face now. She was young, probably 18 to 22, her eyes red from crying and her breath coming in gasps between sobs. I asked again, "Are you all right? Is everything okay?" She didn't respond and she didn't even move. She just kept staring at me, tears streaming down her face, her fingers still gripping at the top of the window. The silence between us felt heavy. It was like she was in a different world, not hearing me, not even acknowledging that I was there. I thought that maybe she was just in shock and maybe she needed help more than I could understand. So I offered her a ride, thinking that I could take her somewhere, help her out. But she didn't react, not even a nod. She just kept crying, staring right at me. I felt like I was in a staring contest with someone who had lost their own mind. I don't know how long I sat there, but it felt like forever. I glanced down the road ahead, not sure what to do. Then I looked back at her and something shifted inside me. I didn't know what was going on with her, but something about the whole thing felt wrong, like I was supposed to walk away. The tension in the air was too thick and fear started creeping into my body. I said I was sorry, though I wasn't sure why I was apologizing, and before driving away I said I don't think I can help you. For a moment she didn't let go of the window, but then her fingers slipped away, and without another word, I drove off into the night. I never thought much about it again, at least not until later. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if she was in some kind of trouble or if it was a trap. I'll never know what was going on with that girl, but I don't think I'll ever forget her eyes and the way she just stood there in the rain, staring at me like I wasn't even there. I grew up in a New England suburb, a huge colonial house over 150 years old. As a kid, I used to get creeped out sometimes, especially late at night. I have 5 siblings, so luckily it was rare for me to be home alone. Shortly after college, though, my mom and I were the only 2 living in our home together. My 3 older siblings were married or engaged, and the 2 younger ones were in college. My bedroom at the time was on the 3rd floor, directly in the center of the house, aligned with the walkway leading to the front door. My mom's bedroom was 1 floor below. One night as I was sleeping, it began pouring rain. No thunder or lightning, just heavy rain and strong wind. The sound woke me up, and I recall lying there staring at the ceiling and listening to the storm. Then I distinctly heard what sounded like someone walking slowly outside in hard-bottom shoes. Initially I wasn't sure because the sound of the wind and rain was so loud that I didn't think it was possible for footsteps to be loud enough to be audible, especially from the 3rd floor. But the sound was becoming louder and clearer, as though the person was getting nearer to my house. Not only could I hear footsteps, but the person was also whistling. I felt compelled to look out the window, but for some strange reason I felt afraid, so I leaned out of bed and parted the blinds a tiny bit. Just enough to peek through with one eye. Sure enough, there was a tall figure maybe a block away walking towards my house. It was a man dressed in a trench coat and dress shoes, but I couldn't see him from the waist up because he was under a large umbrella. As he approached my house, which was to his right, I expected him to continue walking. But as soon as he got to our walkway, he stopped whistling and turned his body to face my house as if he intended to walk up to the front door. But he just stood there. Then he tilted the umbrella back as if he was looking directly up to my window. I couldn't see his face because the black umbrella was casting a shadow. I was shocked and absolutely petrified, too scared to move. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds, then lowered his umbrella to a normal level. Then he turned back in the direction he had been walking, started whistling again and walked away. I slowly laid back in my bed, waited until I couldn't hear his footsteps or whistling anymore, then bolted downstairs to my mom's room. That stranger walking outside on a stormy night scared me so much that I asked to sleep in my mom's room with her. Even though I was 21 years old at the time.